German soldiers swore they could hear death coming for them. A faint broom-like whisper gliding across the night sky. No engine roar, no warning siren, just a soft rush of air, then sudden explosions behind their lines. Many were sure these were not ordinary pilots at all, but witches riding the wind. The truth was more unnerving. The terror that haunted their nights came from young Soviet women flying flimsy wooden biplanes that were older than some of the pilots themselves. The story starts far from the front, with one woman whose name already carried weight in the Soviet Union. Marina Raskova was a record-breaking aviator and navigator. Newspapers printed her photo. School children learned her feats. She had survived a crash in remote wilderness and walked for days through snow to reach safety. To many girls, she proved that the sky did not belong to men alone. When Germany invaded in 1941, letters poured into Moscow. Hundreds of women wrote directly to Raskova. They begged for a chance to fight, not as nurses or clerks, but as combat pilots, navigators, and mechanics. They were students, teachers, factory workers, athletes. Some had flown in civilian clubs. Others had only seen planes overhead and felt a pull. Raskova used her fame and connections to push for something radical. She argued that women could serve in combat aviation and demanded not token slots in men's units, but full female regiments. Many senior officers scoffed. They thought these volunteers were idealistic and fragile, suited for bandages, not bombs. She would not back down. In late 1941, the government approved several all-female aviation regiments. One of them would become the 588th Night Bomber Regiment, a bland technical name that meant little then. The enemy would later give it a far more memorable one. Recruits arrived from all over the country. Many were 17 to 22 years old. Some lied about their age to get in. They came from big cities and small villages, from universities and farms. A handful already had pilot licenses. Others had only glided or jumped with parachute clubs. All were about to be compressed through brutal training. They were sent to Engels, a town on the Volga. The base was crude. Open fields beaten into airstrips. Hangars that smelled of oil and dust. Winter wind that cut through wool and canvas. Uniforms were designed for men, so the women shortened sleeves, took in waists, and stuffed boots. Barracks were cramped, lit by wheat bulbs or lanterns when the power failed. The planes waiting for them did not look like weapons of a modern war. The Polikarpov Po-2 was a two-seat biplane with a wooden frame and fabric skin. The pilot sat in front, the navigator behind. The cockpits were open to the elements, designed originally as a trainer and crop duster. It was slow and carried a small bomb load slung under its lower wings. On paper, it was a terrible combat aircraft. It had almost no armor. A single tracer round could shred the canvas or set the plane on fire. The open cockpit left pilots exposed to freezing air and flying debris. The bomb load was tiny compared with heavy bombers. Yet these weaknesses hid strange strengths. The Po-2 could fly low and slow without stalling. It could take off and land on short, rough strips hacked into fields. Its gentle handling made tight turns possible at speeds that confused faster German fighters. What looked like a flying antique would become a precision tool for night harassment. Training ran from dawn until long past dark. The women marched, drilled, and studied maps until their eyes burned. They learned to service engines with stiff fingers. They practiced loading bombs and worked as their own ground crews. Instructors shouted corrections over rattling engines as the trainees bounced along rough runways, lifting into the air in jerky, hopeful climbs. At night, the field turned eerie. Po-2 silhouettes moved through fog and exhaust. Instructors sent them on practice flights in darkness, teaching them to trust instruments landmarks, and their navigators' voices. The open cockpit became a small world of cold air, vibrating wood, and the dim glow of a compass. Outside the unit, many men expected them to fail. Some saw them as a propaganda stunt. The women heard the jokes. They responded by flying better, loading faster, working harder. Every clean landing and every accurate practice bombing run was an argument they did not need to voice. The key tactic that would make them famous grew out of their plane's quirks. As they approached a target at night, the pilot would throttle back the engine and cut it entirely. The Po-2 turned from a buzzing machine into a silent glider. The only sound was the wind sliding over struts and canvas. From the ground, this made a faint rustling, like a broom sweeping the air. By the time German sentries heard that strange whisper, bombs were already falling. They refined the tactic on real missions. Some planes flew in noisy, drawing searchlights and flak. Others slipped in from the side, engines off, gliding over treetops to drop bombs at close range. Then all of them dived away into the dark, engines coughing back to life once they were clear. To exhausted German troops, the experience felt supernatural. There was no growing roar, only that soft, unnerving swish above, then explosions ripping through tents and supply dumps. When rumors spread that the pilots were young women, the story twisted further. Fear and superstition did the rest. They started calling them Naktheksen, night witches. The name stuck because the attacks never stopped. For the women in the cockpits, the war turned into a cycle of endless sorties. On heavy nights, they might fly 6, 8, even more missions. Take off, fly low to enemy territory. Glide, drop, escape. Land on a smoky strip. Refuel. Reload. Launch again. The airfield barely slept. Lanterns and shielded lamps cast pockets of yellow light on churned mud and packed snow. Mechanics hurried between Po-2 South, checking engines with numb hands, patching canvas with glue and cloth. Frost crusted on the wings. Breath hung in the air. Somewhere, someone always had a kettle going, trying to coax one more cup of hot tea out of too few leaves. The cold was a constant enemy. The open cockpits offered almost no shelter. At altitude in winter, wind sliced through padded jackets and layers of wool. Faces went raw, lashes froze, and fingers inside gloves grew so numb, it took effort just to move them on the controls. Some women landed with frostbite on cheeks and hands, then went right back up after a quick thaw by a stove. They navigated mostly by moonlight and memory. Maps were crude and worn soft by constant handling. Navigators leaned out over the cockpit edge to spot rivers turned to silver threads, roads drawn as faint straight lines, villages marked by dark shapes or a few filtered lights. They counted seconds between landmarks and checked their course by feel when clouds swallowed the moon. The enemy adapted. German searchlights probed the sky, and night fighters hunted the slow biplanes. A Po-2 crew might be gliding silently when they suddenly saw sharp flashes off to one side. Then tracer rounds sliced past the wings, glowing lines that turned the darkness into a cage of light. The fragile planes shook under the pressure wave as bullets tore the air inches from canvas and wood. Pilots threw their Po-2 south into desperate maneuvers. The only hope against a faster fighter was to fly where that fighter struggled. They dove low, skimming treetops, hugging riverbeds, making tight turns that pushed them toward stall speed. Sometimes the German pilot overshot, flying past before he could adjust to their slow, awkward path. Sometimes he did not. When dawn came, the damage told its own story. Mechanics walked the lines, counting bullet holes. Some planes came back with 10, 20, 40 tears in their wings and fuselages. One crew found a hole in the navigator's mapboard where a round had passed through without touching her. Another discovered a shard of hot metal lodged in a seat back inches from the spine. They stitched the planes back together by hand. Canvas was cut and glued. Wooden ribs were splinted and bolted. Control cables were spliced. Each patch was a quiet statement. This machine will fly again tonight. Inside the regiment, survival depended on more than skill. It depended on each other. In the barracks, candlelight pooled on rough tables and bunks. Boots lined the walls. Helmets hung from nails. The women traded cigarettes and shared the smallest treats. A lump of sugar, a scrap of chocolate, a ribbon from home. They mended one another's clothes, braided hair, and swapped stories to drown the memory of flak bursts and tracer fire. Their commander, Yevdokiya Bershanskaya, held the chaos together. Calm, focused, and relentless, she managed missions, rotations, and discipline while watching her pilots the way a stern mother watches over reckless children. Under her command, the regiment would become the most decorated female unit in Soviet aviation. Among the pilots, some stories stood out and later defined the whole group. Nadezhda Popova became one of the best known. Her family had suffered under German attacks. Her brother had been killed at the front. For her, every mission had a personal edge. She flew hundreds of sorties, sometimes more than a dozen, in a single night. On one mission, her plane came back with 40-plus bullet holes, including in her helmet and nap. The others gathered around the battered Po-2 at sunrise, tracing the ragged edges with stunned fingers, while Popova laughed it off through sheer exhaustion. If stories like this fascinate you, tell me which mission you would want to be covered in full. Loss was never far. Beds stood empty after crashes or shoot-downs. A mug left on a shelf. A jacket still hanging on a nail. They created small rituals to remember. Names scratched inside cockpit frames. Little drawings on patched sections of wing. Stories told in low voices after lights out. Hanging on to a joke or a brave moment instead of the way it ended. By war's end, the regiment had flown more than 23,000 night sorties and dropped thousands of tons of bombs and incendiaries. Their raids shredded supply lines, burned fuel dumps, and denied sleep to soldiers across a wide front. The Soviet state awarded the unit guard status and top decorations. Dozens of women received the Gold Star of Hero of the Soviet Union. Then the war ended, and the spotlight moved on. The Po-2 South were reassigned or scrapped. The airfields fell quiet. Many of the women were demobilized and pushed back toward traditional roles. Some stayed in aviation, but most became teachers, engineers, clerks, wives, mothers. Their wartime lives turned into something almost unreal, held in worn photos and metal boxes. Official histories mention them, but rarely in detail. In the West, their story barely existed. The Cold War and closed archives made Soviet units hard to study. The idea of teenage girls in plywood biplanes outwitting German fighters at night sounded like legend, not documented history. Decades later, as archives opened and historians dug deeper, the truth surfaced. Flight logs, combat reports, and personal diaries painted a clear picture. Interviews with aging veterans filled in the human details. Books, documentaries, and museum exhibits began to feature the night witches alongside more familiar stories of the war. Today, air forces around the world have women flying frontline jets, helicopters, and transports. Debates about women in combat still flare up in parliaments and talk shows, as if the question has never been tried. But on the Eastern Front in the 1940s, over thousands of nights, a group of young women in wooden biplanes already answered it. Their story is not just about gender. It is about people doing the impossible with almost nothing. About turning outdated machines into weapons through creativity and nerve. About laughing in candlelit barracks then climbing back into freezing cockpits because the mission board said so. Picture a dark, abandoned strip of land somewhere in Eastern Europe. Grass has grown over the old runway ruts. The hangars are gone. At night, the only sound is wind moving through long stalks, whispering around emptiness. If you did not know better, you would think nothing important ever happened there. But if you listen deeper, you might almost hear it. The cough of a small radial engine, the soft roll of wooden wheels, the rising hum of takeoff. Then, far out over enemy lines, the engine cuts, and there is only the faint broom-like rush of canvas wings gliding through the night. Courage like that never fully disappears. It hides in forgotten logbooks, in medals tucked away, in stories that almost slipped through the cracks. When we pull those stories back into the light, we are not just honoring the people who live them. We are reminding ourselves what ordinary humans are capable when the world is falling apart. Subscribe for more hard-to-believe stories history left behind.